This is our newest edition of A Closer Look with the Monitor. I'm Craig Blumenshine, and this is our weekly discussion and conversation with reporters from the North Dakota Monitor. In this edition of A Closer Look with the Monitor, we're examining two developments that could have significant implications for North Dakota's economy and financial future. First, a recent ruling from the North Dakota Supreme Court that could reshape how oil royalties are calculated and paid. The decision centers on the complex financial relationship between mineral owners and oil companies, an issue that affects thousands of North Dakotans who receive checks from wells across the Bakken. Legal experts say the ruling could trigger a wave of new litigation and potentially change how companies account for transportation and processing costs when distributing royalty payments. Then we'll turn to a very different but equally ambitious proposal from the Bank of North Dakota, the creation of a state-backed digital currency known as the Roughrider coin. Supporters say it could position North Dakota at the forefront of financial innovation, while critics warn that digital currencies come with regulatory and financial risks. To help us understand both of these very complex stories, it's my pleasure to be joined by North Dakota Monitor reporter Jacob Orledge, who's been following these developments very closely. Jacob, welcome back to A Closer Look with the Monitor.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me on.
Let's start with the Supreme Court decision. What exactly did the court rule? And we're talking about the oil royalties. What exactly did the court rule, and why is it generating so much attention in the oil industry?
Well, the North Dakota Supreme Court essentially voided or reversed an order from the North Dakota Industrial Commission. And the Industrial Commission, composed of the governor, the agriculture commissioner, and the attorney general, has among its duties the job of regulating oil and gas in the state. The order that was voided by the Supreme Court essentially attempted to state unequivocally that an oil company that had approached the Industrial Commission asking if it was performing its royalty calculation correctly, the order from the Industrial Commission said, yes, this company, Petro Hunt, was doing things correctly. And the Supreme Court, when it voided this order, did not necessarily do so on the merits. So the jury is still out on this particular issue. It voided the order on procedural grounds.
For listeners, Jacob, who may not be familiar with how royalties work, give us that 30,000-foot overview of the basic arrangement. When an oil well is drilled on private land, how are mineral owners typically paid?
Okay, so thousands of people, both in North Dakota and in other states, own the oil and gas underground. These are typically called mineral rights. Sometimes it's the same person as the surface owner, sometimes it's not. But when an oil and gas company wants to develop that resource underground, they will typically approach the mineral owner and ask them to sign a lease. The oil and gas company will receive permission to drill for and produce the oil and gas that's under those mineral rights. The mineral owner will receive a cut of the revenue that's received from that production. That cut of the revenue, called a royalty, can be anywhere from 12.5% in older leases all the way up to 20%-ish in some newer leases. It depends on where you're signing it and the company and all of those negotiations. But the second half of that, as it relates to this Supreme Court opinion, is something called overlapping spacing units. And I'll just take a quick stab at trying to explain this, Craig, because it's really complicated. Some of the smartest people I know in the industry and the legal world have told me that this is insanely complicated. But every well or every group of wells is drilled as part of a spacing unit. These spacing units are typically 1 mile wide, 2 miles long, and that sort of delineates the area in which the oil is coming from for any group of wells. It also delineates who is receiving royalties, who is receiving a share of that production from those wells. So any royalty owner in that 1 mile by 2 mile rectangle on a map would receive royalties from that group of wells. Where it gets complicated is when you have multiple units like that on a map side by side. because there are regulations in place to stop you from or stop a company from drilling too close to the edge so that you don't accidentally drain the oil that's actually owned by your neighbor. So what the Industrial Commission does is they give companies permission to drill section line wells. These are wells exactly on the border between two neighboring spacing units, the border between two different groups of wells. For these section line wells, the Industrial Commission creates a new shape on a map called an overlapping spacing unit. And this overlapping spacing unit essentially says administratively, this is the geographic area that is affected by this new well that's on the border, the section line well. These overlapping spacing units sometimes partially cover other spacing units, and sometimes they fully cover other spacing units. What the Industrial Commission and the majority of oil and gas companies in North Dakota have been doing is they have been paying royalties from these section line wells, the new wells on the border, to royalty owners or mineral owners in the original spacing units, even if they are not located within the overlapping spacing unit, because they say that these mineral owners are also affected by this new well because of essentially principles of geology and how it affects well production underground. But this takes away from the royalties that are being paid to mineral owners in the overlapping spacing unit, the new spacing unit that was created specifically for this section line well. And that's sort of the issue. That's the divide. Who should receive royalties from the section line well that the Supreme Court was asked to handle? They did not rule on the merits. Essentially, they punted the issue back to the Industrial Commission saying, you have the power to make these decisions. You went about it in the wrong administrative fashion, so we're voiding your order. Go back and do it over again.
Jacob, we were discussing off mic that this is in many ways pitted mineral rights owners, neighbors against neighbors. And you said earlier, this impacts thousands maybe of North Dakotans. How important are these checks for those families and for the local economies?
It can be incredibly important. Mineral owners come in all shapes and sizes. So you've got the large mineral owners who may own thousands of mineral acres in prime territory, and they may receive hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum. You can essentially think of them as mom and pop mineral owners. You have a couple dozen mineral acres from that you inherited from your father or your grandfather or your great grandparents who might have homesteaded in the area, and they might receive a couple $100 a month from these in royalties, and that supplements their income. That helps them raise a family. That helps them supplement their retirement, and in those cases, it can be incredibly important whenever there's a hit to this royalty income.
This also has, in one way, pitted oil companies against oil companies. Jacob, give us more on how that friction has evolved here, about how royalties have traditionally been calculated.
Yes. So this issue, the overlapping spacing units, it's created a divide, not only between mineral owner and mineral owner, but between oil company and oil company. The North Dakota Industrial Commission has in the past estimated 85% of the oil and gas operators in North Dakota follow their method. The other 15% have decided to keep the royalties within the boundaries of the overlapping spacing units, even if mineral owners outside of it may or may not be affected by the new well. These companies are a minority in North Dakota's oil and gas landscape, but they do include some significant players in the oil field, including Continental Resources.
To use a quote from your reporting, the phrase "a hell of a lot of royalties" appears in your coverage. Why are the financial stakes potentially so large?
The financial stakes of this issue are potentially very large because of the sheer volume of people it could affect. A regulator with the North Dakota Industrial Commission in 2024 had said there were 1,400 section line wells in North Dakota, and there had been permits awarded for 2,000. That regulator projected they would reach 3,000 permits soon. That was almost 2 years ago now. And I've asked for more recent numbers. The Department of Mineral Resources says they do not currently track those numbers. But for each of those section line wells, there could be dozens, there could be hundreds of mineral owners affected.
Jacob, looking forward here, why do some legal experts believe that this will trigger litigation?
So, attorneys involved in this case that I've spoken to believe that there could potentially be a new wave of litigation on this issue, no matter what the final outcome is. Because the fact of the matter is, you've got one set of companies doing it one way, another set of companies doing it another way, and whoever eventually ends up on top, that this is the way to do it, somebody has been doing it wrong. And that means that the oil companies have been either not paying people that they were supposed to, or paying people that they were not supposed to, and underpaying others that they were supposed to be paying more. And the scope of that and how many people could be affected by that, it is really hard to estimate. But attorneys involved in the case certainly believe that one way or another, there are going to be a large number of people who are going to be engaging in litigation, either asking for royalties that they believe they should have been paid, or defending themselves when oil companies come and say, we mistakenly paid you this money. Can we please have it back so we can pay the rightful owners of this money? And there are going to be a lot of disputes, and no one is sure what form that litigation is take, let alone how it's going to play out.
Safe to say that this will be disputed for maybe months or years to come, and you'll be following it as it goes forward, Jacob. I want to turn now to a completely different story that you've been covering. I'm enjoying my conversation with Jacob Orledge. He's a reporter with the North Dakota Monitor, and we visit weekly in a segment we call A Closer Look with the Monitor. You can always read Jacob's reporting and all of his colleagues' reporting at northdakotamonitor.com. Excellent coverage from issues around the state, free from paywalls or subscriptions. Jacob, now we're going to talk about the proposed Roughrider coin from the Bank of North Dakota. First of all, it's a stable coin. A lot of people are listening or asking now, what's that?
Well, a stable coin is essentially a form of digital currency. Now, when we think of digital currency, we typically think of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and all the other crypto names. That is not what this is. Not necessarily. It's a stable coin is a digital currency that has been tied to the value of a traditional currency, almost always the U.S. dollar.
In this case, it is the U.S. dollar, backed by blockchain, but go ahead and go forward.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification, Craig. The Roughrider coin that the Bank of North Dakota is developing will be tied to the U.S. dollar. And federal regulations that were put in place, last year, require $1 to be held in reserve by whatever financial institution is holding a stablecoin, to ensure 100% that the stablecoin can always be liquidated and redeemed for that dollar, the value to which it's tied.
Certainly less volatility then in this Roughrider coin market versus traditional Bitcoin. Yes. Jacob, many listeners, I think, are wondering how this might be used in the state of North Dakota. It's my understanding this is more of a bank-to-bank product rather than a consumer product like other states, like my native state of Wyoming has turned to in its Frontier coin, I believe it's called, where consumers may use this coin for transactions and commerce. The Roughrider coin, at least initially, is it a bank-to-bank tool?
Yes, there are a variety of uses that the Roughrider coin could eventually be put to. The Bank of North Dakota executives that I've spoken to since the announcement in October of last year have emphasized that the Roughrider coin is solely going to be essentially a background tool. It's going to be used to streamline bank-to-bank transactions, to enable financial transactions, especially international financial transactions, to happen in minutes, whereas using traditional methods, it might take days for the money to officially move. through the financial system. So it's a way to make the back end of the financial system move more efficiently from how it has been explained to me. Now, down the road, could it be used in a way similar to, I believe it's called the Frontier coin in
I believe
Wyoming?
so.
Down the road, could the Roughrider coin act in a similar manner where you walk into a store and you pay with a Roughrider coin that's in your digital wallet? Maybe. It's could certainly be on the table, but that is not what the Bank of North Dakota is focusing on right now.
In your reporting, Jacob, you say that some bankers were cautiously optimistic, but also raised concerns. What are the biggest risks that are currently worried about in the state?
So I'll preface this by saying we should know more about what risks the Bank of North Dakota is looking at later this month. The Bank of North Dakota will be presenting a what they call a business case, but essentially a risk assessment and a detailed plan to the Industrial Commission later this month at their meeting. And the Industrial Commission will have to sign off and give the green light before the Bank of North Dakota moves forward with the Roughrider coin. In my reporting, I've heard from bankers in North Dakota, and the primary concern so far appears to be regarding liquidity. Now, I am not a banker. I'm not a financial analyst. I strongly encourage you, if you have concerns, to talk with your local bank and see if they're going to be involved or anything like that. But essentially, the concern is that because the Roughrider coin will be tied to the value of the US dollar, and federal regulations require a US dollar or an equivalent instrument like a US Treasury bond to be held in reserve for each stablecoin. The concern is that that is going to be taking deposits off of banks' balance sheets. And that's potentially problematic because that will take money out of the pool that's available for lending within local communities. We have not seen how this is going to play out yet. Those are concerns that are out there. And the Bank of North Dakota is putting together a risk assessment. From what I've been told, they do not see that as a significant concern when it comes to bank transactions because these stable coins can be created or dissolved on demand. But it is a concern worth watching.
What's a timeline, Jacob, that you understand relative to how the Roughrider coin may move forward?
So as of right now, the next step will be later this month at the next Industrial Commission meeting. The Bank of North Dakota will come to the Industrial Commission and they will present its business use case. This will include a detailed plan for how the Roughrider coin will be used. It will include a risk assessment and proposed safeguards to protect North Dakotans and the North Dakota banking system. And it will also include cost projections on how much all of this is going to cost the bank and the state. After that, if the Industrial Commission gives the green light to the Roughrider coin this month, the bank says they are on track to begin a pilot project with a handful of financial institutions in North Dakota in September. After that, no timeline has been released. So the bank will probably take a look at that pilot project, see how it goes, and move from there.
As we kind of wrap it up, what does this proposal say, Jacob, about how North Dakota is positioning itself in the future of digital finance?
Bank of North Dakota executives have said that this is the first example of them, quote unquote, picking their spot in the world of financial technology. They want to ensure that North Dakota banking institutions, whether you're a small bank or whether you're a small bank in a small town or you have locations across the state, the Bank of North Dakota wants to make sure all of those financial institutions have the tools to survive in a digital world. And that means taking seriously everything coming out of the fintech, the financial technology space. This is the first example of them trying to do so, and they want to make sure that those tools are available.
That's North Dakota Monitor reporter Jacob Orlich discussing two developments that could have wide-ranging implications for the state, from how oil royalties are calculated in the Bakken to the possibility of a state-backed digital currency known as the Roughrider coin. You can read Jacob's full reporting on these stories at the North Dakota Monitor website, northdakotamonitor.com. It's a website that is free from subscriptions or paywalls. The reporting is excellent. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us on A Closer Look with the Monitor.
Thank you for having me on, Craig.